The craziest day of my campaign wasn't when I gave a speech to 20,000 people. It was the morning I walked into a courtroom instead of a rally, while every poll said I was winning. No joke. I remember sitting in the back seat of the SUV before sunrise, staring at my reflection in the window while my campaign manager, Melissa, scrolled through her tablet beside me. "We're still up 6 points, she said without looking up. "Great. You don't sound excited." "I'm trying to figure out how someone who's leading a race ends up spending another day in court." She finally looked at me and sighed. "I know." Outside, reporters were already gathering behind metal barricades. Camera flashes bounced off the courthouse windows before the sun had fully come up. Meanwhile, somewhere 300 miles away, volunteers were setting up folding chairs for a rally I was supposed to headline. That thought stayed with me. I should have been there. Instead, I stepped out of the SUV, adjusted my tie, and walked toward a building that smelled like polished wood, old paper, and burnt coffee. A reporter shouted, "Ethan, do you think today's hearing will hurt your campaign?" I kept walking. Another voice followed. "Do you regret anything?" Melissa leaned closer. "Don't answer." I wasn't planning to. The courthouse doors closed behind us with a heavy thump, instantly blocking out the noise outside. Everything became strangely quiet. Security scanners beeped. Shoes echoed across marble floors. Someone whispered into a phone. Court employees moved around like this was just another Tuesday. Maybe for them it was. For me, it felt like someone had pressed pause on my entire life. I checked my watch. By now I would have been halfway to Brookhaven, shaking hands at a diner before heading to the afternoon event. Instead, I was signing legal paperwork. Funny how quickly a schedule can change. One of the attorneys caught up with us. "Morning." "Depends who you ask," I replied. He laughed. "I'll take that as a no. I've had better Mondays." "It isn't Monday." I blinked. "See? That's exactly my point." Even Melissa laughed. Stress does weird things to your brain. Sometimes you forget what day it is. Sometimes you forget whether you've eaten. I couldn't even remember finishing breakfast. Inside the conference room, stacks of folders covered the table. My name sat neatly printed across every label. Seeing it over and over again made my stomach tighten. I dropped into a chair. "So," I asked, "what's today's surprise?" The attorney flipped through a folder. "Mostly procedural." People keep saying, "mostly." That word worries me. He smiled. "It worries me too." For a few minutes nobody spoke. The room filled with the soft sound of papers turning. Pens clicked. Someone stirred sugar into a cup of coffee. Outside the window I could hear helicopters circling above the courthouse. Probably news crews. Probably waiting for something dramatic. The truth? Courtrooms aren't dramatic most of the time. They're slow. Painfully slow. You spend more time waiting than talking. Waiting gives your mind too much room to wander. Mine kept drifting back to the campaign. I pictured volunteers hanging banners without knowing if I'd ever make it there. I pictured supporters checking their phones, hoping for an update. Most of all, I pictured the empty podium waiting backstage. That image bothered me more than anything else. Melissa interrupted my thoughts. "You're doing it again." "What?" "Staring." "Oh. You always stare at the wall when you're overthinking." I didn't realize that. I've worked for you 4 years. Guess I should stop trying to hide it. She smiled. Too late. A volunteer rushed into the room carrying another tablet. We've got a problem. Melissa looked up. What happened? The venue in Brookhaven is full. I couldn't help smiling. That's a good problem. People are still showing up. Even though I knew I wouldn't be there. That hurt more than I expected. For a second I imagined walking onto that stage. The music. The applause. The energy. Instead, a clerk opened the conference room door. They're ready. Just like that, the fantasy disappeared. I stood up slowly. Straightened my jacket. Took one deep breath. You ready? Melissa asked. No. She nodded. Me neither. We walked toward the courtroom together. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. Every step echoed. Every camera turned. Every whispered conversation stopped as we passed. Someone on the other side of the room quietly said my name. I pretended not to hear it. Not because I was ignoring them. Because I couldn't let myself think about anything except the next few hours. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone inside stood. I took my seat. For a moment, everything became completely still. I rested my hands on the table and looked around. Dark wood. Bright lights. Rows of empty benches waiting to fill. This wasn't where I believed I should have been. Not today. Not during the biggest campaign of my life. Yet here I was. And somewhere far away, an empty stage was waiting for a speech that nobody knew if I'd ever get to give. The first hour felt like 4. I don't know if you've ever sat in a courtroom with absolutely nothing you can control, but it's a strange feeling. Campaigns teach you to keep moving. Shake another hand. Give another interview. Solve another problem. Courtrooms don't work like that. You sit. You wait. You listen. Then you wait some more. The judge entered, everyone stood, and the hearing began with the kind of routine legal language that somehow managed to sound both incredibly important and unbelievably boring at the same time. I leaned toward my attorney, Daniel. Is any normal person supposed to understand half of this? He didn't even look at me. No. That's comforting. He smirked without breaking his focus. The hearing continued. Pages flipped. Arguments were made. Objections came and went. I caught myself looking at the clock every few minutes. Not because I wanted the hearing to end. Because I kept calculating where I should have been. 9:30. I'd usually be sitting at a small-town diner, drinking terrible coffee with local business owners. 10:15. We would have driven another hour north. 11. The volunteers would have started letting people into the venue. Instead, I was still sitting in the same wooden chair. Melissa quietly slid her phone across the table during a short break. Brookhaven rally packed. Overflow crowd outside, ****. I stared at the screen. You probably shouldn't show me that. I thought you'd want to know. I do. I handed the phone back. But it doesn't exactly make this easier. She nodded. I know. Outside the courtroom, life refused to slow down. Campaign headquarters kept calling. Volunteers kept texting. Interview requests piled up faster than anyone could answer them. Every few minutes someone's phone vibrated. Daniel finally silenced his. If one more reporter asks whether you're available for an interview, I assume you're going to tell them no. I'm running out of creative ways to say it. I laughed. Try, he's a little busy sitting in court today. Melissa snorted. Too sarcastic? Not sarcastic enough. For a few seconds the tension disappeared. Then the courtroom doors opened again. Everyone returned to their seats. Reality came rushing back. The afternoon dragged even slower than the morning. My mind wandered. Not to politics. To ordinary things. Lunch. Fresh air. Driving with the windows down. Anything except fluorescent lights and legal arguments. Funny what you miss when you can't have it. At one point I watched a courthouse employee walk past carrying 2 sandwiches. I whispered to Melissa. I'd vote for whoever brought me one of those. She covered her mouth to hide a laugh. You are unbelievably hungry. I honestly forgot breakfast. You had breakfast. I did. You ate half a bagel. Oh. Exactly. Even Daniel smiled. Stress has a way of deleting random memories. A recess was finally called. The 3 of us stepped into a quiet conference room. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Daniel loosened his tie. Melissa checked messages. I just stood by the window looking down at the crowd outside. From up there, the reporters looked tiny. The satellite trucks looked like toys. The noise couldn't reach us through the glass. Melissa broke the silence. The campaign's holding together. I never doubted the team. They're worried about you. I'm worried about them. She looked confused. They're the ones doing all the work while I'm stuck here. They'd rather you were with them. So would I. She smiled sadly. We know. Another campaign aide rushed into the room carrying a folder. Ethan. Please tell me that's good news. It depends. I hate when people start sentences like that. He laughed nervously. We've rescheduled tomorrow's town hall. To when? We're trying. So there isn't actually a new time. Not yet. I rubbed my forehead. Okay. Another pause. He hesitated. There's one more thing. Go ahead. The New Haven event may have to be cancelled too. I closed my eyes. How many now? He quietly named the number. It was higher than I expected. Every cancelled event represented hundreds of people who had planned their day around showing up. That bothered me. Campaigns aren't just schedules. They're promises. When you tell people you'll be somewhere, you want to be there. I hated breaking that promise even when it wasn't really my choice. Daniel noticed the look on my face. You can't blame yourself. I know. But I still do. Nobody argued with that. Because they knew it was true. The recess ended. Back into the courtroom. Back into the chair. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the polished wooden floor while the hearing continued. At one point I completely lost track of the discussion. Not because it wasn't important. Because I heard cheering outside. Just faintly. Someone must have been gathering near the entrance. I couldn't make out words. Just applause. For a split second I imagined it was coming from one of the rallies. Ridiculous, I know. My imagination was running on fumes. Daniel nudged my elbow. You with us? Sorry. Long day? The longest. He nodded. We're almost done. People always say that. Almost done. 5 more minutes. One last issue. Just one more document. It never actually works out that way. Another hour disappeared. Then another. Finally, as the judge began wrapping up for the day, I felt something I hadn't all morning. Relief. Not because anything had been resolved. Because I could finally leave the room. The hearing adjourned. Chairs scraped backward. Attorneys gathered folders. People stretched like passengers getting off a long flight. Melissa looked at me. You okay? I think so. You don't sound convinced. I'm mostly wondering what time it is. She checked her watch. You don't want to know. I probably don't. Outside the courtroom doors, dozens of notifications exploded across my phone the moment I turned the sound back on. Missed calls. Messages. Updated schedules. Interview requests. Photos from rallies. Videos from supporters. One clip caught my attention. The Brookhaven crowd was still there. Hours later. Someone had started chanting my name while local volunteers addressed the audience. I watched 10 seconds before locking the phone again. Melissa noticed. Couldn't finish it? I shook my head. If I watch the whole thing, I'll just think about where I should have been. She quietly slipped the phone back into her bag. Tomorrow's another day. Hopefully. We started walking toward the courthouse exit together. The bright afternoon sunlight poured through the glass doors ahead of us. Outside waited another wall of cameras. Another round of questions. Another chance for someone else to tell my story before I had the opportunity to tell it myself. I straightened my jacket one more time, took a slow breath, and prepared to step back into the noise. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. The courtroom wasn't the only battle being fought anymore. The moment those courthouse doors opened, the noise hit me like a wave. Mr. Carter. Ethan. One question. Do you still believe you can win? Camera shutters fired non-stop. Microphones stretched toward me from every direction. For a second, I couldn't even see where I was walking because every network seemed determined to get the first reaction. Melissa leaned toward me. Straight to the podium. No stopping. No stopping. I nodded. The team formed a loose circle around me as we moved through the crowd. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. Nobody was running. Nobody was yelling. It was organized chaos, the kind that somehow exists around every major political event. We reached the small platform that had been set up across the street. I climbed the 3 wooden steps. Took a sip of water. Looked up. Hundreds of faces stared back. Some supported me. Some clearly didn't. Most just wanted answers. I rested both hands on the podium and waited. The crowd slowly became quiet. Funny how silence can be louder than shouting. I wasn't planning to spend today here, I began. A few people chuckled. Neither was I was supposed to be visiting communities across the state. I was supposed to be listening to families, meeting business owners, and thanking volunteers. Instead, I glanced back toward the courthouse. I spent the day inside that building. No applause. Just silence. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I believe these accusations are false. I believe the legal process should be fair. And I also believe the people deserve the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates asking for their vote. I paused. Not because I forgot what to say. Because I wanted everyone to absorb it. I can't get today back. I can't shake the hands I missed. I can't visit the towns that expected me. But tomorrow. I smiled for the first time all day. Tomorrow I'll get back to work. That finally drew applause. Not explosive. Just genuine. I stepped away from the microphone. The speech had lasted less than 5 minutes. It didn't need to be longer. Sometimes people don't remember the longest speeches. They remember the honest ones. As I climbed back into the SUV, Melissa handed me another bottle of water. Better? A little. You looked calmer. I felt calmer. She smiled. Good. The vehicle pulled away from the courthouse, and for the first time all day, nobody said anything. The silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. After about 10 minutes, my phone buzzed. Another poll. Melissa glanced at it before handing it over. You don't have to look. I know. I looked anyway. The numbers had barely changed. I blinked. Seriously? She laughed. I told you. I expected worse. So did everyone else. I leaned back against the seat. The strange thing about politics is that people spend so much time trying to predict what everyone else will think. Most of the time, nobody actually knows. Another message appeared. A volunteer from Brookhaven had sent a photo. The rally stage. Hundreds of people. A handwritten sign hanging from the front barrier. We'll see you tomorrow. I stared at the picture longer than I probably should have. Melissa noticed. What does it say? I turned the phone toward her. She smiled. That's nice. It is. No fancy slogan. No political message. Just 4 simple words. We'll see you tomorrow. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about court schedules. I was thinking about tomorrow. About getting back on the road. About finally standing on one of those stages again. The campaign headquarters came into view just before sunset. Volunteers were still inside. Lights filled every window. When we walked through the front door, conversations immediately stopped. Then someone clapped. Another person joined. Within seconds the entire room erupted into applause. I honestly froze. Not because I thought I'd done anything special. Because I didn't think I deserved it. Guys. Melissa laughed. Just let them. One volunteer stepped forward. We saved dinner. Another held up 2 cold pizza boxes. Someone from the back yelled, they're only, 6 hours old. That finally broke everyone. The room filled with laughter. I grabbed a slice. This might actually be the best pizza I've ever had. It definitely isn't, someone shouted. It absolutely isn't, another volunteer added. But you're hungry enough to think it is. They weren't wrong. For the next half hour, politics disappeared. Nobody talked about hearings. Nobody talked about polls. Nobody talked about reporters. We talked about terrible coffee. Traffic. Someone's dog that kept stealing campaign flyers. The volunteer who accidentally ordered 3,000 blue balloons instead of 300. Normal things. Human things. I realized how much I'd missed that. Eventually the room quieted again. People started packing up for the night. Melissa walked over carrying tomorrow's schedule. You want the good news or the bad news? I laughed. After today, surprise me. The good news. She placed the schedule on the table. We're back on the campaign trail at 7 tomorrow morning. And the bad news? You'll have to wake up at 4. I groaned dramatically. Maybe the courtroom wasn't so bad after all. The room exploded with laughter. Even Melissa rolled her eyes. That's the first ridiculous thing you've said all day. I've been saving it. She folded the schedule and handed it to me. Get some sleep. I'll try. Later that night, I sat alone in the hotel room, jacket hanging over a chair, tie tossed across the desk, shoes kicked into opposite corners. The room was finally quiet. No cameras. No speeches. No legal arguments. Just me. I looked over tomorrow's itinerary one last time. 3 towns. 2 community centers. 1 evening rally. Exactly where I wanted to be. I turned off the lamp and stood by the window for a moment. The city lights stretched across the skyline below. Today hadn't gone the way I planned. Maybe tomorrow wouldn't either. That's life. Plans change. Schedules fall apart. Unexpected doors open while others close. The only thing you really control is whether you keep showing up when morning comes. I closed the curtains, set my alarm for 4 o'clock, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow wasn't about making up for everything I'd missed. You can't relive yesterday. Tomorrow was simply another chance to move forward. And sometimes, that's enough.